It is truth that the preachers should not be talking about their personal life as they are mulling and meditating by the word of God we just heard, but I couldn't resist it. As my granddaughter is staying with me or with us, it reminds me of this story where similar age granddaughter, maybe a bit older, with her brother is visiting grandparents, and she asked Grandma, who made us? Grandma, being a good Christian, said, God made us. We are God's family. Oh, God. Yes, I heard of that in Sunday school. But how does God look like? Well, she says, well, look at you. You're so pretty. And look at those big, beautiful, curious, smiling eyes of yours. That's how beautiful God's eyes are. Oh, but how is his hair? You see, Grandma has a long gray hair. She has very rich, very long gray hair, really beautiful, very, very, very rich. Oh, Grandma, that's lovely. And is he tall? Yeah, he's like your older brother, slim and slender and good looking. And the granddaughter looks at her grandfather, and she looks up and down. She looks at his bald head and says, was Grandpa adopted? So yes, it is funny that sometimes we can't really describe who God is or who Jesus Christ is, and who Jesus Christ is. Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, it's a difficult concept for all of us to grasp in many ways. But even more, the life can be a series of challenges to interpret God and to describe God to our own life events, or indeed to describe God of our liking. And I know that this sounds insane at best, but nevertheless is way more realistic and way more our reality than you would think. You know that famous saying that says that God created one man and then a woman, but man created thousands and thousands of gods. And we might feel that as Christians we are somehow having an upper hand in the world on this topic, but when I look around me, when I look at all the Christian countries and all the post-Christian countries that are now secular, it seems that whilst we don't have a problem of inventing thousands of gods, we definitely invented 1,000 different Jesuses. Jesuses who seem to be very often not having anything to do with each other. And whilst the story of a granddaughter with grandparents having an early breakfast on Sunday before going to church, quaint and cute, the impact on the world is absolutely devastating. We could feel that maybe on this island, separated from the rest of the world and the world troubles by miles of oceans, and in this small church separated from big politics of this country itself, in this compound tucked in between beautiful fruit trees and a sanctuary where we know everyone, and you have beautiful welcomes when somebody comes back after many months, we may feel that this really has nothing to do with us. But unfortunately, the bad news is, not the good news is, the bad news is we are participating in this misconception of the world, and therefore opening the doors for everyone to present the world to their fancy. You just have to look at the world around us and think, who really is representing God, and who the God is if I look at all the believers of all the faiths and how they create this world and the reality for the next generation. The other day somebody said to me, you know, men are really good human beings. I said, yes, I agree. It's just that our behavior lets us down. And you look everywhere, from the wars in the Middle East to the wars in Europe. I sometimes have a feeling that this is just a sideshow, that the destruction, exploitation of the earth is so far advanced that we simply don't know what to tell the next generation on what kind of earth they will live without a shade to hide, without a water to drink, without food to eat. I guess you could say most of the people in this church, maybe even the younger ones, will not be here to see that. But one cannot resist thinking that all of these big spectacles in the world, the fights between liberals who have gone crazy and conservatives who have gone crazy, is but a sideshow. The fights between East and West and Europe and Islam and Christianity and whichever other tribes we can invent across the world is but a detraction of the true reality of how we treated both the opportunity to live on this earth and the earth that was given to us to live on. I look at my brothers and sisters of other religions. I'm not even talking about the Abrahamian religions. And you can really portray God to be anything. And not just portray God to be anything, but you can move into countries that are Christian and persuade people that ultimately the God is about emotions. And if you want to experience God, you need to quieten down and empty your mind. And maybe that's true. Or maybe physical exercises are just physical exercises. Maybe calming your heart is just calming your heart. Maybe the peace that one gets from breathing properly and a movement or whatever sport you're undertaking or whatever religious or post-religious efforts of diet or like whichever diet you choose, maybe all this is good physically, but it doesn't fill the empty mind and it doesn't fill the empty heart. Yet the world tries, and we try to fill it with more and more. And I'm not going to talk to you about bigger and bigger screens, because once upon a time I could preach about people giving up their lives to buy a bigger TV. Now it seems we are giving up our lives to buy a smaller screen. I guess fashion changes. You could talk about secularists. You could talk about the way they're defining the world. You could talk about other Abrahamian religions. Look around. The two biggest wars currently led are all by followers of Abraham, both in Middle East and in Eastern Europe. What is it that we didn't understand about God of Abraham? Why is it that we are representing him the way it suits us? And we might think as Christians that somehow this doesn't concern us, that we know exactly what we are talking about. We know the right truth. We are going to heaven. And everybody else, unfortunately, who hasn't given their life to Jesus, well, they're going to have to be goats. We have very often terrified the world by our behavior, saying that we are doing it with the authority of God. But at a very personal level, we have terrified our children by this vengeful God who can't wait to roast the goat. This God who made a mistake by sacrificing himself on the cross, showing this great love, so he changed his mind, and now can't wait to catch any of you or me into a transgression so he can fill up the empty spaces he has in hell. But is that really the Jesus that you find in the Bible? Yet, the reading you heard today very often is justified as the reading that determines that only few of us will be wearing a very long hair or a wool as sheep, and the rest of them are going to go into the pen as goats. And you know how it smells in a pen. You don't need any other hell. Just stay there all night with the goats in a pen and you will have hell. Strange how we portray Jesus just like that. And we think it doesn't really matter because I know what I believe. But look at the generations that have decided that the God we have served them, Christian God we have served them, is so unacceptable, so judgmental, that they have decided that secularism is the preferred way. How many young people that you know in Europe, and many of you, or in Western world, but more and more in Africa as well, in our continent, are declaring themselves as spiritual? They're not religious. They don't want to be identified with threats. They don't want to be identified with God who has to rule with fear. And in our hearts, when we think about it, we always remember that God so loved the world that he gave his only son. But somehow when we are communicating this, the message is lost. So we ended up with generations who are forming the world in their own image. They have become higher power. On this very end, very liberal. On this very end, very conservative. Unfortunately, all of it mostly in Christian countries, or countries that were built in Christian faith and with belief in Christ. And on this side, they can define anything. I know when you look at me, you think I'm fat, but you need to understand that I identify myself as skinny. So I'm really a trans-slender, sort of in there. And you can do that for anything you don't like. You can define a new reality from gender to the way we work, where we work, how we behave, how do we make children, our body contact and emotional relationship. You can just define the new rules for whatever you want. Because once you take the rules of God and you throw them out of the window because he is so judgmental, you're left with an empty room in which you can bring any junk you can think of. He made us wonderfully in his image. And a lot of that image is not showing in my non-slender, semi-bald appearance. But from time to time, you can hear it in my voice. And for many people, you can hear it when the fingers touch that piano. You can see it in the way that grandma cooks that meal. There seems to be the power of God that man finds difficult to replicate. Because God, that is love, as John says, God that is love, as the whole gospel says, has only one purpose for all of us, that he loved us so, and that we love him with everything we have, and love our neighbor the way we love ourselves. In other words, that we understand that the reason we are made in God's image is because only the being that is made in God's image is able to transmit God's love if they wish to do so. It is funny, however, that when you look around us in our own behavior, you can hardly guess we are talking about God of love. Because on this other side, we have God who demands behavior restrictions. We so much are made in his image that when Moses brought the 10 commandments, they actually were not commandments. They were more than commandments. They were wishes. They were how each one of us would love to live. They were that gap between the earthly reality and God's creation called man. That gap. The reason that none of us can live those commandments or those wishes of ours is because this isn't our nature. As we have heard in Paul saying, I have these two natures, and we all do. Yet, this is the nature of God, God who is always faithful. He never betrays us. He never falsely testifies to us. He never murders us. He never shows disrespect to us. He never loves us falsely and gives us the same as a blessing of being God's channel of love. Saying, you know, when you follow Jesus' commandment of love, Well, then you shall not want to have anybody else but Jesus. You shall not want to have fake dead gods in your life. You shall not want to ruin your body and your mind by giving it to mammon to work 24/7. You shall not want to disrespect your brother and sister and mother and father. You will never want to betray the person you love, or God forbid, to kill them. And why would I really want anything that any other man has when I know that everything I have was given in love, and that all I have to do is love what God has given me? We love those commandments. We pretend that they are orders. We pretend they are restrictions. But in reality, if we could build a society that is powered by love, those commandments would be our daily reality. And when you read from Matthew 24:45 all the way to Matthew 25:46, there are 4 semi-parables and parables in which Jesus is talking to each one of us here. He's talking to his followers. He's not talking to non-believers. The time has come. He has just described what's going to happen with the temple. He has described the end of times. He's described that he's coming, not this time as a small baby born incognito, but this time he's coming in everybody's sight. And most of Abrahamian, all of the Abrahamian religions, Muslims, Christians, and Jews, are waiting for Jesus. But they're waiting for Christ, for Messiah. But I'm not sure they're waiting for the same one. As most of the Christians are not waiting for the same Jesus. Because for many of us, the warnings that we read in chapter 24 and 25 are but a proof that Jesus was not serious, maybe, when he was on the cross and says, "Father, forgive them, they know not what they're doing." Because he clearly says they're faithful and unfaithful servants. And when an unfaithful servant, which is the first parable of 4, when the unfaithful servant mistreats the others, eventually the master will come back and chop him into pieces. What a different God we would love to interpret here. But you know, the God we describe is the God that's in us. It is not Jesus that changes. Unfortunately, it is because we don't change either. Nobody really, well, not nobody, but very many people, unfortunately, spend their lives praying to Jesus, but never accept their new creation. Forever interpreting Jesus in the constraints in their own mindset and who they are themselves. Projecting themselves as the Jesus of reality that has nothing to do with Jesus himself. The very importance of the scriptures is not so that we can be obedient children who read the Bible. It's because it is in these scriptures, Jesus' sayings, that you find the true image of God. It is when he talks to the non-believer, a Roman soldier, officer who has conquered, mistreated, and killed his own people, and shows him mercy by healing his servant. It is in refusing to condone and accept the stoning of a woman caught in adultery. It is revealing himself first and foremost to the lowest of the lowest. Number 1, a woman, no rights in a society. Number 2, a half-caste, Samaritan. Number 3, somebody who has 7 husbands, and none of them married to her. I don't know what kind of profession that is. Yet, he makes her the first evangelist. What kind of God he now becomes in our mind? When we plant the seeds of God, we need to remember that our children will grow the tree of God in their own hearts and souls according to the seeds we planted. And if it's God that chops, then that's the God that they will grow up with and eventually leave that tree. in their hearts that you have planted, that we have planted. In a second parable, we talk about oil as faith. And truly, you can interpret it that way. And we say, you know, if you run out of faith, you run out of luck. You ain't going into a banquet. In the third parable, we talk about fear of God as the main reason we don't take the blessings he gave us and multipliers. And we are thrown out into the darkness. And in this beautiful picture of nations getting together, we are talking of Jesus trying to trick everybody by not telling them that he's there. So both the goats and sheep are meeting people who are in need, and they don't know it's Jesus who is watching them to catch them into disobedience. And therefore, it seems that most of us will end up being goats. Some will get fed up with this and simply decide to give to the poor and to the needy and to visit the sick and those in prison, not in the name of Jesus, but in their own name. But the sad truth is, you can give without loving, but you can't love without giving. And still they will remain good goats. And some of us will say, well, I prayed every day and I followed every commandment. I never met any beggar because I make sure I stay away from that side of town. I haven't met anybody who is sick because I never go to hospital, or anybody who is in prison because I don't even drive past the prison. And therefore, I could never be caught the way others were caught. What a picture of Jesus we are portraying in our heads. And those guys who only had one talent, he dug it into the ground. How unfair that he has saved that little that was given to him in life, and now he's thrown into the darkness. And so for the virgins, and so for the unfaithful servant who got bored waiting. But is there a deeper message in all this? And is there a message that doesn't say that Jesus is vengeful and changes his mind based on our behavior? Is it possible that we are saved by grace, not because we are good people? Is it possible that there is another way of looking at these parables? That Jesus is telling his believers, being my follower, you accept the power that can be intoxicating. So when you start developing the love for that power, you will stop having admiration for the power of love. And therefore, I don't need to chop you anywhere. You have chopped yourself. You love power way more than you love me or yourself or anybody else. Is it possible that he's saying, look, it is so beautiful you welcome me every Sunday. It is so beautiful you welcome me on your crusades. It is absolutely amazing in your morning prayers. I love it when you have all of this time that you're dedicating to me. But is it dedicated to me? Or is this a show the way it is for those 5 maiden who says, listen, just give me half of your oil. He will never notice. I mean, this is just a show anyway. Let's just make sure that all the lamps are burning. He will not stay long enough to notice that lamps have only half an oil. And he's saying, when you think that relationship with me and a worship is but a theater, you have become a director of your own life. And you have become a director of the reality of this world because you're forming this world in a picture of a movie that you have, how your church should look like, how we should clap, how we should sing, how we should pray, should we kneel, should we stand, should we light a candle, what kind of show should we throw for Jesus as if he has never seen it before. Be careful, my followers, not to fall into this trap, to think that the forms is equal substance, that tradition means a relationship. It is beautiful, it is good, it unifies you as a community. Please continue doing it, but never ever forget, I'm younger than you, I'm older than you, I'm today's present, Alpha and Omega, beginning and the end. You can't fool me, you're just fooling yourself. I often wonder what a boy who has dug the hole and put the 1 talent into the hole did the rest of the time. And you know what he did? He went and did his own business. There's nothing wrong with the fact that he didn't multiply this. It is that he took all the talents and capacities and brain and connections and relationship God gave him and just worked for himself. And therefore had nothing to give to God because he was too tired, too spent in a self-centered development of the eternity that will never come, building his life as he will live forever, yet living it knowing he will die tomorrow, because he won't live forever. And likewise, Jesus turning to us and saying, you know, I know that one commandment I gave you is not complex enough. I know you can't mull over it and make long philosophies and stories. Or maybe he's just saying that to some of us who are naive, because many of saints, preachers and pastors and theologians have made their whole life about this whole one commandment. And if you look at the part of your life you're really proud of, you will see that you yourselves have made life career out of implementing that one commandment. Look at the way you treat people you truly love. Imagine if you could treat the whole world like that. And imagine if the whole world could treat you like that. Look how beautiful it is, how your face lights up when you see a person you love. And I have no doubt you love Jesus, and so do I, just not as much as he loves us. And that's okay. And it's beautiful to see when we are singing how our faces light up. What happens when we leave these gates is a story of disbelief, that this world is too cruel for us to live by that great commandment. And Jesus is saying, I don't have doubts that goats believe in me, and I don't have doubts that sheep believe in me also. The problem is, for me to know you and to shape you, he seems to be saying we need to be in continuous loving relationship with him, where the loving part starts with him. He is with the weak and the sick and the disadvantaged. He is not sitting in palaces unless there is somebody in that palace who is living in their own prison. And therefore, if we want to meet him, where would we go? And if we want to know him, is it truly enough that we can say, I am saved. I invited Jesus Christ into my life. Or is he maybe saying, please, let me invite you into my reality. Let me show you how my life is when I am with those who need me the most. So the message of the end of times is not that somehow God has made a mistake by sacrificing for us, and therefore all of this is just another way to draw us into hell. But a mistake that in our faith, more often than we would like to think, we simply take Mickey out of God. We simply pretend, we simply lie to ourselves, and we simply pretend that we are telling him the truth. And we are not doing it deliberately, not at all. It is true, I think we are good goats, but he made us to be sheep, obedient to him. I think it is because maybe at times, at least myself, maybe I'm not talking about you, at least myself, at times I think, is the power of his love truly so large, so immense, that he can convert this good goat, maybe not into a skinny sheep, but definitely into a sheep. Can I truly put on the new creation? And the answer is no. But what I can do, I can let him put on my new creation.